I told him before all of this happened was that holding on to that kind of grudge was like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. You're listening to AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski. One of the things we really want to do with AMI Audiobook Review is bring titles and authors we think deserve praise to your attention. That's why we have Aamer Khan as one of our regular contributors. He's our very own AMI Audiobook curator. Welcome back, Aamer. How's it going?
It's going great. Always happy to be on the show.
You're giving us an author profile of sorts for Karin Slaughter. I'll let you take the lead. Where do you think we should start? What do we need to know about Karin Slaughter?
I think the first thing you need to know about Karin Slaughter is that she's from Georgia. So a lot of her books do, especially the Will Trent series, take place in Georgia. And one of the things I really like about her writing is like you really feel like you're there. You get a real sense of what it's like to live in Georgia and what the politics and sort of the surrounding pieces are all about in terms of not only the geography, but in terms of the temperament and the characters and life in Georgia.
So what kind of like idiosyncrasies do you see having to do with like the state of Georgia specifically? Like what kind of behaviors do people exhibit that's like distinctively Georgia? I'm curious.
But I mean, some of the books are narrated by someone with a southern accent, so you definitely get that feeling there too. But Slaughter is also great at highlighting sort of geographical and historical pieces in her books. So Grady Hospital, which is the largest publicly funded hospital in the United States, is featured. Atlanta's airport is featured as well, which is the world's largest passenger or busiest passenger airport in the world. In the States, I believe, maybe not the world, but those types of things, just the general heat, the climate, and those parts are there as well as some architectural pieces, which are sort of part of the backdrop of her books.
Well, they say write what you know, and if she's from Georgia, it does make sense that she would be particularly well placed to write about like that type of setting. Let's back up to her body of work. What is she known for, and what are her genres that she'll usually stick in?
I think she's mostly known for suspense and thriller. Her Will Trent series is probably her most famous series. It was actually put into an Amazon Prime series, I believe, or
cool.
An ABC. I haven't seen it yet, but that is something that has been adapted into sort of a TV episodic piece. I'm not sure how many books there are. I think there's just about 20 maybe, or 20 or less of the Will Trent books. I'm on number 7 right now. I think what she does particularly well is the pacing and suspense. I think that's really important in a thriller. The other thing that she really does well is all of her characters are very, very intricate. None of her characters are sort of stock characters that are, sort of a James Bond superhero type of, they're good at everything type of characters. A lot of her characters have a backstory, have some sort of, if not trauma, then some sort of interesting backstory. And she does a great job of having a first-person narrative in multiple views throughout her books. So it's not just one character's first-person narrative that we're actually having the story told from. It's actually multiple, and that's from like book 1 in the Will Trent series, where you're looking through the eyes of, a police officer, a person who is just released from prison, as well as the main character, Will Trent, who is a GBI special agent.
Tell me more about the Will Trent series. What do we need to know? Like, if I'm picking this up, what should I expect?
So similar authors would be like Michael Connelly, in the Harry Bosch series. So it's very police procedure. Like I said, the hallmarks for Karin Slaughter are more towards how she does the character and the suspense. But the sort of, violence and gore level is probably in line with the Harry Bosch series, if people have read those by Michael Connelly. Michael Connelly is an author from LA. He actually used to be a newspaper columnist for the LA Times on the crime beat. So a lot of his stuff from LA, and I've talked about him in previous episodes that I've been here. But the style is very different, but content and sort of violence and being adult content wise is very similar. to that particular series. But the other thing you really need to know about these books when you're picking up the Will Trent series in particular is that basically Will Trent is a GBI agent, which is sort of the state version of the FBI in Georgia. Slaughter does a great job of talking to people in law enforcement as well as other, facets of her books before publishing. And she's a great storyteller in that regard. I mean, she does a lot of research and pieces, but doesn't get bogged down with too many details that would make the story boring. I mean, she's great at picking out relevant pieces and putting it into the books where it would be highlighted or would be interesting to the reader. And yeah, her books really, really flesh those out.
This links back to what I was talking about earlier in the show with Red Sale about authors doing research. And as a reader, you know that you're in good hands with this author because they've done their research and they're not just throwing things at the wall. It's not just all made up. I really appreciate logic and realism in books, even in like a fantasy setting or anything that has like fantastical elements. I want it to make sense. I want it to be explained to me in a way that's like logically consistent within the own series. And you're saying that this is the case with this Will Trent series, that she does a lot of research. Absolutely. And that it doesn't seem over the top or like they actually explain like the forensics and the science behind it all.
They really do, and she's great at that. But and she's also excellent at the observation piece. So comedians like Jerry Seinfeld, as well as great authors, they tend to have a lot of great observations about sort of the human condition, and Slaughter does a great job of highlighting those throughout her storytelling as well. Some of the quotes, even the one that you highlighted today, sort of speak to that fact. Some of her other books, you mentioned the body of work before, have to do with growing up female and at different sort of historical periods in time. The book I just finished, Criminal, has a timeline set in the 70s as well as present day, and she does a great job of making you feel like you're in the 70s. There's a whole afterward section on the research she did on that, and as I said before, she does a great job of pulling out certain facts and pieces which will make you laugh and are fascinating. For this particular book, she found the book is a lot about female police officers in the Atlanta Police Department, which was very new in the 1970s. There weren't very many female police officers. And she found evidence and things in the archives that residents of Atlanta actually called the police to report female people stealing police cars because they didn't know that there were female police
they didn't
on the force.
Wow.
They didn't believe it. They couldn't understand it, and they thought it was females basically stealing the police cars. So
and the uniforms too. Wow. Was there anything about her writing style that you find like specifically very distinctive about her, not just her writing but also like her storytelling style? Like what sets her apart?
Yeah, I think that the fact that she really does a great job of sort of being telling the story from different people's perspectives. I mean, we see a lot of that now in terms of different writers giving that an attempt, and it's more of a bolstering the storyline rather than a full-fledged character looking through their eyes and what they're feeling and what they're doing. So it's she does it a lot more than just a plot device. You get an idea of who these characters are as she sort of moves perspectives. The other thing I think she does particularly well is that her books are always satisfying. They're not easy to guess either. I mean, a lot of these police procedures, I mean, you start with chapter 1, you're like, yep, I know how this is going to end. She's great at not doing that to her readers. But at the same time, when it ends, it all sort of makes sense, as you said earlier, in terms of a logic workflow piece. She does a great job of that. And I haven't come across one of her books yet where it's, whoa, I didn't see that, and that doesn't make any sense. What's going on there? So you don't have those kind of things, which I mean, you mentioned earlier, or Nasreen mentioned earlier about authors that have sort of become popular, and sometimes you don't understand why. One very popular writer is James Patterson, who's also a thriller suspense writer, and I picked up one of his books, and yeah, I mean, to your point, I couldn't accept a lot of the beyond reality pieces of this police procedure, and yeah, had to give up on him.
I'm curious, what was it specifically about that James Patterson book that bothered you? Like, that it wasn't scientifically sound or logical? Like, is that
There were
what
a
bothered
couple
you?
of Yeah, there was just too many of them, I think.
Too many what?
I think too many pieces which were sort of beyond reality. I mean,
Uh,
the story takes place in like the dead of winter, and there's a guy driving a motorcycle. I'm just like, that's just not good. I don't, and like, and it's not a bad guy; it's a police officer. I'm like, there's nobody in their right mind that would be riding a motorcycle the dead of winter in Washington, D.C. It's just not going to happen. Um, and then one of the characters in the book is is the principal agent for, I think, the president or something, a Secret Service, and she's flat broke. And I'm like, that that
how does
doesn't
that
make
make any
any sense.
sense? Do they not pay you?
She's
See, no, it sounds
exactly.
like stupid nitpicky things, but it's really annoying. It's like the author did not think
Yeah.
about this. You can only suspend your disbelief for you can only do that so much. I have to believe
Yeah.
that this world is real, and if things like that happen, like a police officer not getting paid, like come on, why would you keep working there?
And not just like
It
any
seems
police
ridiculous.
officer is like, somebody at the highest echelons of law enforcement, part of the Secret Service and all this. I mean, like, yeah, and there's no explanation for it either, in terms of, why she's in debt. She's not a gambler. She's not anything. She's just racked up in student debt. And I'm just like, that's just not possible. And spoiler alert totally for this particular book, but the book ends with the police officer intervening between other police officers to kill the murdering uh, bad guy. And this is after the murdering bad guy
Hmm.
almost killed his children. And I'm like, no, that's he's he is not gonna he is not gonna intervene on this guy's behalf to save his life after somebody has messed with his children. That's just no,
I like
no.
the
I
way you
mean,
describe that. You read it and you just go, no, I'm not going to
no,
accept that. That
no.
doesn't make any
That's
sense
just
to me.
impossible. Like, and especially the circumstance of the way the book, and he actually puts himself between, the police and this murdering bad guy. So
Oh
he's actually
God.
risking his own life, and he's a single father. I'm like, there's no way. Like, no,
Oh, that's so
not
cheesy. I'm
happening.
not going to accept that. I want to
No,
bring it
no.
back to Karin Slaughter. I think you mentioned that in the Will Trent series, there's
Hmm.
20 books. Is that right?
Under 20. I'm at number 7. I'm not precisely sure how many there are.
Okay, we
There's
know
a
there's
couple
a
of
lot.
short stories tossed in there as well.
Even if we know that there's only seven, that's a lot of books. And in like a
Hmm.
thriller genre, suspense, the first thing that comes to mind for me is that a book like that a series like that kind of has to be formulaic, where there's a crime, there's an investigation, and then there's the big reveal.
Right.
Is that how does she handle the formulaic nature of these types of books?
Very similar to Law and Order. I mean, there's different crimes that happen in different focus for the books. I mean, from a formula perspective, it is templated sort of like that. But just like the Eve Dallas series, which I'm a huge fan of, there's also relationships that keep progressing and a cast of characters which keep growing. So she's got a lot going on, and some of the books have, obviously more on one character than the other. So it's always interesting to see where she's going with it. There's a lot of room for a lot of these characters to grow as well. So unlike Law and Order, it's not sort of, okay, we introduce these police officers and then that's it. We don't really know much more about them. Um, there's a lot more depth to her books, and I think that's another character trait of her books that sets it apart from others. There's a lot of deep thoughts in it in terms of not only observations but in terms of characters. You can really talk about it. I mean, they're great book club books if if you'd like to take those on, right?
What makes a good book club book?
I think depth. I mean, going back to that, I mean, multi
Hmm.
layers and things. I mean, if it's a straight line book with a plot, beginning, middle, and an end, and there's not much to talk about, then there's not much to talk about. But in her books, it's so deep in terms of you can talk about the geography, which I have, the characters, the actual police investigation part. You have forensics. You have all these, backstories of these characters, which is a whole other topic entirely. There's concepts of, forgiveness, about how far is too far, about growing up, about childhood, about children. I mean, it's all over the place. There's so many topics to cover with Karen Slaughter.
You're listening to AMI Audiobook Review. I'm Jacob Szymanski talking to Aamer Khan. We're doing an author profile on author Karin Slaughter. I want to bring in Nisreen Abdelmajid. She's our producer for AMI Audiobook Review. One thing with the suspense genre is I struggle with it for one specific reason, is that the only way suspense works is that information is withheld from you. And you're kind of left in the dark in a lot of ways, and it's up to you to try and piece it together. And I think that bothers me sometimes. Niz, do you like living in that area where you don't really know what's going on, but you can have hunches and ideas? You like trying to figure it out?
I really like that. I find it's very it kind of puts your mind in many different scenarios, and I think you're creating the plot before you get into the plot, which is it's nice. I love brainstorming. I love just having that idea. However, when it comes to thriller and suspense books, I don't know about you guys, but I get scared easily. So I have certain times where I read these certain books. So it has to be daylight, first of all. It has to be around other people. I can't be alone.
Wow.
And yeah, I know I'm a scaredy cat when it comes to this, but that's just how I am. I get scared easily. So not knowing, as you mentioned, like not knowing certain things does put me in a scenario where I'm like, I know something is coming. I know it's gonna screw with me, but it's also a good thing. Like you don't want all the answers in the beginning, then there's just no mystery. That's the whole point of a mystery book.
Yeah, I mean,
I kind of do want the answers.
You do? Goodness gracious! I recall reading a thriller. I think it was a thriller or a suspense book, and it's about a police officer who comes to this mining town looking for a missing person. And of course you're like, okay, well, check the mine first. And of course that's the last place she checks. I'm just like, it was a complete waste to read. I don't understand.
What's the point of that? What do you think of being left in the dark, Aamer? Is that something you... Okay, I describe it as being left in the dark. Maybe it's more like the author is giving you more to chew on. What do you think? Can you live in that place where you don't know much and you have to figure it out yourself?
Yeah, I think I can. I think it takes a great author to strike that balance. And authors like Karin Slaughter do a great job of that, of giving you enough that you can start guessing what's going on. So you feel like the investigator that's actually investigating in the book, right? Rather than,
and I like that.
some sort of weird twist at the end. Like, a lot of people love the Da Vinci Code, but for me, the defining moment of that book, I had to put it down and sort of, use some choice words because I could not believe who the bad guy was, and I still do not like that ending. But it takes how much information to give the reader. I think Nasreen enjoyed that part in terms of you want to feel like you're the investigator, right?
Yes. I like the fact that you have so many questions. However, I want those questions answered at the end of the book. Okay.
Yes.
I don't want to end the book
read,
and
right?
it's just there's no answers. And I hate when that happens, where you just finish the book and you still have a million bazillion questions that you didn't even get to. So it's nice being the investigator, but I do want to end up finding out what these things are. I want these questions answered.
I think when I'm reading a suspense book or like a murder mystery, but it's very slow, I tune out a little bit if the mystery is dragged on. Like I want to feel like I'm getting closer to the answer at a steady pace. Yeah. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just getting dragged in the mud. But I think you mentioned it earlier, Aamer. Pacing is so important in suspense really novels. Now, the thing is, I think we kind of disagree, or we don't always picture the concept of fast-paced and slow-paced books in the same way. because a book can be fast-paced in the sense that the plot moves quickly, but it can also be slow-paced in the sense that like scenes are long. You know what I mean? Like sometimes a book can have lots and lots of scenes, but the plot moves slowly. But other books, the plot moves very slowly, but the other way around. You know what I mean? It's there's a lot of ways that books can be written where people interpret them differently. All that said, I have a question for you. What is it you think makes a page turner so intriguing or so difficult to put down?
So difficult to
Who wants to go
down.
first?
I can take it on first. I mean, I think, again, you hit it right before you asked the question, pacing, right? I mean, giving just enough for the reader to keep going in terms of you want to know what's next, right? Okay, here's a bunch of clues, put them together, and then, the reader is like, okay, I need to know what's happening next, and keep going that way. One thing I do think that...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Aamer.
I was just going to say, I think that's something that Dan Brown in the Da Vinci Code did particularly well, is putting mysteries in front of the reader that were solvable, but were difficult enough that it took time for the reader to sort of disassemble that in terms of pacing.
Well, I can agree with that. I feel like what I find as a page turner is leaving me with a question that I want answered to. But as you said, I feel like pacing is very important. I feel like some writers stretch out certain things too much, and that makes me not want to turn a page. Do you feel like that, Jacob?
Yeah, multiple times. But it's funny when I read book reviews sometimes, which I read quite a few, and people will say like a book is very fast paced and I disagree with it, and then I'll read another one and it'll say, oh, this book was just so slow, and I just could not disagree more. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes we disagree on what slow paced and fast paced really is.
Fast-paced,
and I think we often just equate fast paced with good and slow paced with bad, and that's not. I don't think it's a one-to-one relationship.
What I find is like slow is when they add scenes that just have nothing to do with what's going on, and it's just stretched. It's just to fill time, and that's what bothers me.
I don't think that's necessarily a problem. If a book has scenes that doesn't really move the plot forward. I think if the scene is fun or interesting or adds exposition that I'm interested in, I don't care. Like it doesn't need to move the plot forward or like develop characters to be a worthwhile scene to keep in the book.
Yeah.
And I think books can be slow and fast paced as well. I mean, again, going back to Karin Slaughter, our featured author. Fractured is a book that starts off ridiculously quickly from a pacing perspective. I think I sent an email to you folks about like the opening scene, and the opening scene is basically a rich suburban mother who comes home and finds her home broken into, and she's immediately concerned about her daughter and comes into the house, goes up the stairs, and sees her daughter dead, with a man holding a knife above her, and the man starts to come towards her, and they struggle, and there's a very, she writes action very well about all the thoughts and emotions that are going through her mind as she's struggling with this would-be attacker, and manages to subdue and kill him, and enter the police after this, extremely fast-paced sort of scene. Things slow down. You're catching your breath as a reader to figure out, okay, well, this is an interesting opening scene. What's going on here? To find out that the investigator that comes on scene determines that, number one, it's not her daughter that is dead. It's her best friend. And the man that was attacking her was actually pulling a knife out of his own stomach because he was stabbed by somebody else.
What is all these twists?
So, and that's the opening scene, right? I'm like, wait, where's the book going to go from here? So you're sitting there just like the cops going, what on earth is going on? Who and what and why and the whole nine yards, right? So,
It
Aamer,
messes
we're
with your mind.
Yeah, it really does. Aamer, we're nearing the end of the amount of time that we have.
Sure.
Can you just let us know where we should start with Karin Slaughter if we're interested in picking it up?
She has a few short stories. I'd start there. I mean, if you're not enjoying the short story, you're probably not going to enjoy the full-length books. She has, I think, three. Busted is one. She has one which she actually wrote with the author of the Jack Reacher series. That one has the word gold in it. It's about Fort Knox in Kentucky. And there's a third one which is escaping me right now, but that one is probably the best one to start with to see what her writing is like. That particular book is about Will Trent at the Georgia airport, and he sees a father and daughter interaction, and he's not sure if the father is the actual father of the daughter or not, and whether to question and arrest. So it really highlights the sort of real-time decision-making that law enforcement has to do sometimes, and when to cross that line.
All right, so if you're interested in getting started, look for Karin Slaughter's short stories. Aamer, I want to thank you so much. We'll have you on sometime next month.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
And you too, Niz. Thanks for organizing this.
Thank you.
That was Nisreen Abdelmajid. She is the producer of AMI Audiobook Review, joining us from Mississauga. That was Aamer Khan, one of our regular contributors to AMI Audiobook Review and our very own audiobook curator. He was doing a profile on author Karin Slaughter. And that's it for today's AMI Audiobook Review segment. That's all the time we have for AMI today. If you missed any of it, catch the repeat of it on AMI Audio every 8 hours. You can also find it on podcasts, plus you can watch the program on YouTube right after the show ends. I'm Jacob Szymanski. Thanks for listening.